Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 3, Episode 3, The Pen. Hi everyone. Oh my God, I'm so excited for this episode. I'm just going to dive right in. No life chit chat is worth taking time away from just diving into this episode. And my life's fine. It's going all right. No big announcements, no big changes. So let's just get into why I am so excited to cover this episode. My family, I think I've mentioned here and there, we would tape Seinfeld. So we had just collections of VHS tapes. And I want to say that this episode was at least the first or second one that we had on tape. And certainly the first one I watched over and over and over again. I just thought it was so hilarious. I still do. And this episode for sure solidified my admiration for Julia Louis-Dreyfus, everything about her as a comedic performer, and it hasn't waned since. I mean, clearly I'm doing a podcast about her, but this was the first time as a young girl seeing a woman act like a total doofus on a current television show. I mean, I know I'd seen classic clips from I Love Lucy, and there were definitely things that I had seen on shows before my time, maybe in syndication or whatnot. But this was the first time I had seen a female actor who was in a show that I liked that was currently on acting this way. And it was just, and we'll get into it obviously, but just this performance in this episode, it just laid that first brick of foundation. I probably said that wrong. I don't know construction, but you know what I mean. This is the seed that was planted for me, and it's just grown and grown, my love for Julia Louis-Dreyfus. But this episode means a lot to me, and I'm so excited to cover it because of that reason. And, stop wasting time, Shivani. Let's just keep going. And don't talk to yourself in the third person. You're not Jimmy. All right, so the synopsis for this episode from my coffee table book is as follows. While visiting his parents in Florida, Jerry endures a scuba diving accident while Elaine endures a very uncomfortable night on a sofa bed. A tribute to Jerry's dad goes awry after Jerry accepts an astronaut pen from surly retiree Jack Klompus, and painkillers get the better of Elaine. This episode is written by Larry David. The first scene, we are in Mr. and Mrs. Seinfeld's Florida apartment. They are waiting for Jerry and Elaine to arrive. Helen Seinfeld is doing such a mom thing, just looking out the window, waiting. Oh, they think they're late. They're supposed to be here a long time ago. And Morty's just pissed that there's no Scotch tape. Apparently he needs some Scotch tape. They finally arrive. Welcome to Florida. They're late because they rented a car. Jerry didn't get the insurance. His mom's so confused. Why did you have to rent a car? You could have used our car. I'm not using your car. Jerry says, it's so hot in here. Why did you put on the air conditioner? They have all these little, I could go through, I've written it down, the sequence of what they talk about, but basically it's just a ping pong dialogue that spans a range of topics about Jerry's speech. No, it's not a speech. Is it a speech? Yes, they're making a testimonial to your father. I do love you have a lake. The lake's not real. What are you talking? The lake's real? What are you kidding? They built the lake. Well, it's real. It's water. And Elaine starts taking her stuff into that little spare room off to the side. And Helen says, no, you can sleep in our bed. And there's this whole back and forth about, I can't take your bedroom. We don't even sleep. Why should I be comfortable? Oh my goodness. It's just so much stuff being covered in this opening scene. They do have a little side conversation. And I think this is the only very indirect follow-up to the Deal episode where they end up together at the end, Jerry and Elaine. When Elaine is busy getting her bags into that room, Jerry and Helen kind of go off to the side and she's asking, I thought you two were, you guys could stay in there together. I thought you two were. And then he kind of, shushes her and says, and then of course, and then he's trying to explain it that, of course, classic dad, why are you whispering? So Jerry explains to his mother and father that, can't really seem to be friends when we sleep together. Well, what are you looking for? I like looking. He's an idealist. How long can you look? I'm going for the record. Jack and Doris arrive. They meet Elaine, and then it's also revealed through conversation that they're going scuba diving as well as visiting for Morty's ceremony. And of course, right away, what? Why are you doing that? For fun. For fun? And then Jack says, well, let's settle up for last night. I owe you $19.45. Who had the Coke? That was a little bit of a debate. With your father, you got to get it right to the penny. I just love Jack Klompus. I'll get into that more in a little bit. Well, then Jerry looks over at that pen that Jack's using to write the check. He explains it's an astronaut pen, writes upside down. Where'd you get that? Because oftentimes I ride in bed and I have to lean on my elbow. Oh, it was a gift. That was enough for Jack to say, well, take the pen. Pushes and pushes. Jerry says, I couldn't, I wouldn't be comfortable. Take the pen. Do me a personal favor. Take the pen. Jerry takes it. Okay, gee, boy. Then Jack and Doris leave. What'd you take his pen for? And then there's, of course, this little argument about why he took the pen. He was pushing him to take the pen. Elaine is just enjoying all of this. I love the cuts to Elaine just shaking her head going, wow, this is crazy. Helen is worried. I know his wife. She's got some mouth on her. She's going to tell everyone in the condo now that you made Jack give you the pen. So Jerry says, well, do you want me to return the pen? Morty is totally against that. No, you're not going to return that pen. That's ridiculous. He kind of establishes something that I don't think comes up again, but that Jack has enough money. He's got plenty of money. He doesn't have a Coke. Then the scene ends with Elaine trying the pen out and says, hey, it writes upside down. Well, the purpose of the scene, it's a very lengthy setup scene. I'm not complaining, but a lot happened in this first scene of the episode. Jerry and Elaine have come to Florida for Morty's outgoing president of the condo association ceremony and for scuba diving. Overall, my take on this scene, I've seen this scene at least 30 times, and that's super conservative. I might be a little bit embarrassed to estimate the true number. But watching it through the lens for this podcast, I realize how much exposition they had to deliver in this scene. Of course, we get why they're visiting for Morty's thing and the scuba diving. But more importantly, what was established was the vibe of being in this senior Florida community and what it's like to be amongst the people there, just being amongst, just the vibe of everyone. That was really the most important purpose of this scene. And there are all these mini scenes within this big scene, the lake argument, discussing Elaine, like what's going on with Jerry and Elaine with his parents, Jack and Doris's visit, and then the pen, the heat of the apartment, and Helen Seinfeld's general disposition. It's all this, it's just like this world building exercise, and exactly what Jerry and particularly Elaine are dealing with. And speaking to what Elaine's dealing with, being the guest in someone else's world, it's always risky, right? Especially if it's a friend's parents' place. There's like this intimate relationship that you step into and you feel that right away. You're the outsider. While everyone else feels very comfortable, they'll argue in front of you. They'll have their little quirks and they'll openly say what they want to say. They're in their own house. So you're this outsider kind of observing that, which is why I think they had those scenes of Elaine just shaking her head. And in a nutshell, there isn't a second of the scene that I don't love. It's such a great opening scene for this episode. So the next scene, Elaine is boiling in that bed. Why is it so hot in here? Jerry is trying his best to make her feel comfortable and maybe change the subject. How about that guy writing the check for $19.45? I'm sweating. I'm in bed sweating. That bar is right in her back. It's making a dent. Oh my gosh. And then Jerry says, well, what about me? I'm sleeping in a love seat. Like I'm in a space capsule with my feet in the air. Well, the purpose of this scene, we see Elaine suffering in the uncomfortable bed and the uncomfortable heat of the condo. Overall, my take is, this is our little appetizer of the Julia Louis-Dreyfus hilarity for the episode. I mean, that spin she does in the bed when she's just so frustrated with that stupid bar. I remember rewinding that and watching it and rewinding it. I mean, over and over again. I love how she does that. And there was something about the way she, like her face and her expression and the way she says, I mean, we've all gotten to that point where she knows like spinning in that bed's not going to do anything, but she just needs to like let it out. Oh, I love that so much. This bar is biting my back. Like that spin is so, and that's not easy to do. I think she needs to be commended for that physical comedy she pulled out in this scene. And this is another, thing that Seinfeld's just gifted with, all these relatable experiences that don't get talked about a lot, but hey, it's in this Seinfeld episode. Who hasn't slept on a pull-out couch that isn't 100% terrible? I mean, the mattress is usually like an inch thick and you feel every like metal protuberance holding it up. It's awful, awful, awful. I do understand that they have made a lot of improvements in the world of pull-out sofas. I have yet to experience that. I love that Jerry is trying to make her feel better because he's in that awkward position of trying to make sure she's comfortable. I mean, he's dealing with his own parents' tendencies, which he's so much more accustomed to, and he's accepted them, but he also knows it's not convenient for Elaine. So his position is very relatable as well. All right, moving on. The next scene, it's the morning after. Jerry's sitting with his dad, getting very specific directions to the scuba diving place. And Helen's still not over this. What are you going down there? What's down there that's so special? What's so special up here? Elaine makes an entrance, hunched over. She's in pain. They rush over to her. That bar, it's right in my back. I don't even think I can go scuba diving. She insists that Jerry goes. We'll stay in a hotel tonight. Elaine just perks up when Jerry says that. And then she just begs, Mrs. Seinfeld, please, I'm begging you, put the air conditioner on. You're hot? I've lost 6 pounds. Evelyn enters, the neighbor. She gets introduced to Elaine. Elaine tries to say hello in the best way she can while she's in all this pain. Evelyn asks about the new pen. So where's the new pen? What? The pen, the one Jack Klompus gave you. Uh-oh. It's all over the condo, just like Helen had predicted. Oh, they go back and forth. Then Gussie calls. Gussie knows about the pen. She's calling to see what's going on. Helen is at her wit's end. You're giving him back that pen. And then Elaine reminds Morty, please, the air conditioner. The purpose of this scene, the sofa bed has ruined Elaine's back and she cannot go scuba diving. And Jerry taking Jack's pen, everyone knows about it. Hottest story right now at the condo complex. My overall take is just more great physicality from JLD. Sure, it looks like she's just hunched over, her back hurts. I think that's maybe the go-to for any actor to say, okay, your back hurts, hunch yourself over. But she adds these little moments. As someone who has actually thrown out my back a couple times, or my back seized up thanks to carrying kids on one hip for about 5 years straight. She's totally spot on. Especially, I love the little moment when she appears to have almost like a mini spasm when she says hi to Evelyn. She says, hello, Evelyn. I love that choice. Speaking of Evelyn, I love Evelyn. She is so adorable. She is played by Anne Morgan Gilbert. I'm just going to go with Gilbert. I think that's how you pronounce it. She is best known for playing the neighbor Millie Helper on The Dick Van Dyke Show and Fran's grandmother on The Nanny. 2 shows I am not familiar with, unfortunately. I am most familiar with Anne Morgan Gilbert's work on Seinfeld. She passed away in 2016 after a rich career in hundreds and hundreds of television shows. And she's so adorable in this episode. And she'll come back again in the Cadillac episode, but her debut as Evelyn is in the pen. And it couldn't be better. It's such a great understated portrayal. It's grounded because I feel this kind of a role of being the condo gossip, could easily be a caricature. But the way she plays it, it just makes it so much funnier because she's just very matter of fact. And that's why Seinfeld's so great. They find the funny in the reality of the situations. There's no need to make it caricature-ish or clownish or over the top. I mean, there are over the top moments, don't get me wrong, but just in something like this, just an older woman in a condo complex who heard a juicy tidbit about a pen. Doesn't need to be anything more than that. And I love the little moments like, so, where's the new pen? And then later when is that what she said? Who? Blanche! What are you talking about? The what are you talking about gets me every time. I just absolutely love it. Such a fantastic performance. I don't know why the choice was made to make Elaine kind of keep participating in the conversation. She's in so much pain, but I love it. Again, she tries to so nicely say hi to Evelyn, and then she also has to add, the astronauts use them. I mean, she's in so much pain, but she's like, no, I still have my manners. I'm going to participate. I don't know why they did that, but I love it. And again, we're building this world of just this crazy senior condo community. Evelyn knows about the pen. Gussie calls and asks about it. This is the hottest story right now in the community, and everyone is buzzing about it. Helen and Morty are very passionate about their opposite stances on the issue. He's not giving him back that pen. You're giving him back that pen. It's just, this is causing a lot of stress. The next scene, Elaine is on the floor. She's kind of stretching out her back and has her legs elevated. They've turned on the AC, and Helen is freezing, rocking back and forth with the sweater on. Then Morty suggests, hey, maybe some muscle relaxers would help, because Elaine does want to go to the ceremony later, even though Helen says, you don't have to go. Jerry enters with burst capillaries, as both of his eyes are just bruised and blackened. So he explains what happens and intense pressure on his mask, like his eyeballs are being sucked out of their sockets. Then Jack enters. Doris needs to borrow a pocketbook because the shoes have to match the pocketbook. What is she doing? Yoga? Oh, and we can apply our learnings from last week's episode where I did my little dive into what the difference between a handbag, a pocketbook, and a purse. For those of you who may not have listened, there are different distinctions. The handbag is the biggest, the pocketbook is the medium, and the purse is the smallest. And from the looks of what Helen brings out, I would have said it's a purse, not a pocketbook. But, I think these rules are very loose. And it's not important to this episode. Moving on. Okay, Jerry takes the pen out and says, look, you know what? This was such a nice gesture, but I want you to have it back. Again, a little back and forth, but Jack takes it back. All right. He's so excited. Morty he was waiting for the moment because he knew he was going to take it back. Pounces and says, you got a hell of a nerve taking that kid's pen. Whose pen? His pen. This happens to be my pen. Oh my gosh, he practically begged me for it. They start arguing. Sponge cake, scotch tape, it's all coming out. And Jack leaves after a big fight, after a big Jerry is at his wit's end. And during this, also, he and Elaine are looking at each other just going, what? Look at this craziness. What is going on in this community? What is driving you to this behavior? Oh, man. And then he says, isn't he supposed to be the MC? Yeah, he's supposed to be the MC. Well, this should be a very interesting evening. And then we have Elaine again, trying to bring it back to her needs and say, what about those muscle relaxers? Well, the purpose of this scene, so this is kind of the setup scene for the drama of the following scene. So the establishments being that Elaine is going to take muscle relaxers. Jerry has black eyes from his scuba diving adventure. Morty and Jack get into an epic fight over, well, what else? The pen. And overall, I love the looks between Jerry and Elaine in this scene. They're the only two seemingly sane people observing the madness. And Helen freezing. I feel you, Helen. That's me. I am constantly wearing a sweater in my house during, well, it's summer technically, but I'll just call it the air conditioning season in my house. My husband, he runs hot, so he prefers like a meat locker atmosphere in our house. So I always have a sweater nearby. And it has to be said, Sandy Brown, the actor who plays Jack Klompus, easily in my top 3 favorite secondary characters. He just like lights up the screen. Plus those eyebrows. The eyebrows are just like this extra added bonus of like how amazing he is. Those eyebrows are insane. I like that I mentioned it before, but like how Elaine sort of brings everyone back to reality in the last 2 scenes, just like the air conditioner and the muscle relaxers. Guys, can we just, she's trying to herd the crazy towards something she needs, which I really liked. Okay, the next scene, we are at the ceremony for Morty, and well, Elaine is loopy on pills. She took too many of them, Jerry says. She's very amused by pretty much everything. The photographer asking them to say astronaut just sends her over the edge. Uncle Leo enters. Elaine meets them. She meets Aunt Stella. Well, of course. What else is she going to do except say, Stella? I'm so excited. Uncle Leo mentions he saw Jerry on The Tonight Show. Johnny was very rude to you. In between all this conversation, Elaine just can't stop yelling Stella. And, Aunt Stella says, this better be good. I'm missing Golden Girls for this. I hate her like poison. The purpose of this scene, Elaine has taken the pills. The ceremony must go on, even in the midst of the fight between Jack and Morty. Okay, I'm going to try and keep this short because I could go on and on and on and on and on and on about this scene, but it's genius, it's genius, it's genius. This entire episode solidified my love for JLD as a comedic influence in my life. But it's this scene in particular. This is the one that did it for me. I mean, oh God, where do I even start? Okay, from start to finish, I only watch Julia Louis-Dreyfus if she's in the shot. And I have since I was 12. I can't get enough of what she is doing with her body, with her face, everything that she is doing while she's in this short scene. To me, it just, I never get tired of it. I never not laugh at it. It's just, it's fantastic. And how much fun this must have been to play this drugged out version of your character. And she plays it like the muscle relaxers. Like she's hunched over like, okay, yeah, we see that her muscles are relaxed overall. But it looks like the muscle relaxers also relaxed her eyelids and like her tongue and mouth area because she can barely keep her eyes open. And she just keeps like licking her bottom lip and like biting it. I just love it. And the build of each of her Stellas gets me every time. And the goofy, like closed-eyed smile she has after each one of them. Oh my God. Okay. When I was watching the episode for the podcast, my daughter came in and said, oh, can I watch with you? And she's sort of lukewarm on Seinfeld in general. She loves Elaine. She really does. But yeah, if I'm watching Seinfeld, she could take it or leave it. But she was like, oh, I want to watch this one. And she laughed at this scene with Elaine saying Stella. She laughed so hard. I mean, the full belly laugh that I see her reserve only for like a TikTok video or YouTube video. So for her to laugh this hard in that same manner, it's high praise from a tween. So I just want to put that out there. This scene holds up. JLD's performance holds up. And my daughter didn't even understand the Stella reference. I mean, I didn't understand it when I first saw it. I knew later. I'm like, okay, Streetcar Named Desire. This is the famous scene with Marlon Brando yelling it. And I mean, I know it's a play as well. But anyway, you don't even need to know that. That's my point. My almost 11-year-old daughter was just beside herself, could barely breathe, laughing. I'm sure I was influencing it too because I was laughing so hard as well. But oh my gosh, she made me rewind it because she just thought it was so funny. So, I mean, there's no reason to even talk about what else happens in this scene, whatever. There's a conversation, blah, blah, blah. But to me, the only person on screen is JLD. Although I do love the ending with Helen. That laugh into the, oh, I hate her like poison is genius. Great delivery. Moving on, the ceremony for Morty. Jack gives his speech. It's sort of a roast, which in any other circumstance, if they hadn't gotten into that fight, would have been funny, but Morty is not taking it well. Slept on the job, and that's what you say. Helen's trying to just calm him down. Come on, he's just joking. Elaine is at the head table just laughing. Sorry. Oh, God. I'm just imagining it in my head, and I just love it. So Elaine is laughing way too hard. Jerry's looking over at her with his sunglasses on. Oh, man. And finally, Morty's had enough. Tell him when you took my son's pen back. Tell him about that. He gets up. He starts addressing the room. He gives my son a pen and he takes it back. Tell him about that. They get into an argument somehow with the microphone. Morty breaks Jack's dental plate. You broke my dental plate, you son of a bitch. Then Helen says, Jerry, do your act. They're all going to leave. So he's trying to do it, getting heckled by all these old people. And then what's the perfect way except for Elaine, who has been dozing off after laughing way too hard. She dozes off and just gives the loudest one yet. Stella! The purpose of this scene, it's just the climax of every plot point established in the episode. Most notably about the pen, but pretty much everything they've talked about. Overall, I mean, this is the perfect way to end sort of an ode to Florida senior communities, a big blowout fight at the ceremony for Morty amongst, just a room full of their friends and community members. I love how Helen is trying to calm Morty down, during the roast. And it's just the perfect old man fight, too. It's like they're not going to really throw a punch. They're just going to do this weird kind of... They don't really show much of it, but you just know that there's a little tussle, right? And even though there's not a big punch or anything, Jack's dental plate is broken. The heckling of Jerry is perfect. And you probably, if you guys are big fans, which if you're not, I don't know why you're listening to this, but it's Larry David's voice is in the background there. I'd rather have a bottle of scotch. And again, I watch Elaine in this scene as well whenever she's on camera, even when she's like far off in the corner. And I love that she goes from laughing hysterically with her eyes closed to dozing off and then just that final scream of Stella. And again, Elaine has kind of been putting the button on a lot of these scenes with the air conditioner, the muscle relaxers, and now with Stella. All right, the next scene. It's our last scene of the episode. We're at Helen and Morty's place. The chiropractor's there saying Elaine can't move for about 5 days. Jerry tries to weasel out of staying with her the 5 days. Excuse me? Never mind. And her reaction, too. I mean, you just feel it like, what? I have to stay here? Evelyn enters. She's got the scoop. What has to happen in order for them to be kicked out? Her grandson could be Morty's lawyer. He's brilliant. And then Morty enters. Oh my gosh, not very dissimilar from how Elaine entered after sleeping on the couch. He's just in so much pain. Helen was very comfortable. 5 more days? Well, it's like 2 days, really. It'll go by like that. Jerry's trying to make her feel better again. Purpose of this scene, Elaine aggravated that back. Shouldn't have taken those muscle relaxers, probably. And she needs to stay for 5 more days. Morty is the next victim of that damn sofa. And Evelyn has the scoop on what they need to do to not get kicked out of the condo. Overall, oh God, 5 more days. You can feel how torturous that would be, I think, for anyone who doesn't live there. And going back to them building this world and establishing just how annoying it would be if you're not an elderly person to be amongst these people, amongst the vibe of the place. It's just you when he says 5 more days, I remember being little and watching and going like, oh my God, I couldn't do it. And Elaine is just beside herself thinking, how the hell can I stay here for 5 more days? Here. Great resolution scene to a great episode. All right, let's take a quick break and I will see you on the other side. Technology. It's helped the world in immeasurable ways. But every now and then, don't you yearn for the past? A past that may not be as convenient, but feels like a warm hug from your childhood. That's why you need to download I Got It, Keep Going, a new app that converts the GPS voice on your phone to the voice of elderly parents. Before Siri, Alexa, or Hey Google, you had your mom and dad giving you detailed directions on how to get where you were going. I got it, keep going comes complete with questioning why you're going where you're going, using landmarks that no longer exist, and a range of distance measurements, none of which are close to accurate. You're going to Arby's? Why not Kenny Rogers Roasters? It's closer, it's got better food. All right, well, okay, so what you want to do, you want to take Butternut Avenue all the way to Crooks Road. It's about a quarter mile, 3 miles, 7 miles or so. Take a right, and then you stay in that left lane. Okay, make sure you stay on the left lane because there's a lot of slow traffic in that right lane because of the high school, about 10 miles up the road. So parents, dropping off their kids, gets back to, wait, you're not going in the morning. So you should be fine. So right or left lane, it's fine. Some things Siri doesn't do. Go on tangents. And then you'll pass Misty Vista Apartments, which used to be Amber Apartments. That was where my old buddy Sam Garrison used to live back when we were working at Alton and Lippman. That was it was a while ago. Yeah, I think it was, gotta be at least 20, 25 years. No, was it Amber? He lived in the... Trailing off is another feature of our app, but a simple command of either I got it or keep going will prompt the directions to start again. Well, anyway, what was I saying? Efficient? No. Annoying? Yes. Oddly comforting in a world where thinking of the past is all you need to keep from driving off a cliff? Absolutely. Download I Got It, Keep Going when it's out of beta testing and approved, which we hope will be sometime before the Festivus season. I got it, keep going, for when you just need to yell at old people. Do you need directions to our house, dear? Because you haven't visited in a while. And we're back. There were pretty great extras for this episode, as you can imagine. It's a very classic episode of Seinfeld. The inside look, Jerry is interviewed, and both Jerry and Larry talk about how at that time, their parents, Jerry's mother and Larry's parents, both lived in this type of a community. And the pettiness of what goes on there, Larry said, just needed to be broadcast. So that's what made him want to write this episode. So George Shapiro, who was an executive producer on Seinfeld, he was the one that had an astronaut pen, and he gave it to Larry against Larry's will. Larry didn't want to take it. So that was what prompted that storyline. And in fact, in the Inside Look interview, Jerry pulls it out of his pocket. So Jerry has it, I guess. Julia Louis-Dreyfus was interviewed, and she was just, as we can imagine, and not surprising at all, but so delighted with the material she got in the pen. It was just the most thrilling, she said. And she said that she loved that it wasn't gender-oriented. I mean, who would have ever thought to give that crazy storyline to a woman at that time? So she was just so appreciative of it. Jason Alexander is also interviewed, and it's mostly just to talk about how this episode really bothered him. He, as he puts it, his ego came out, and after the table read, he was not happy because, he says after the table read, but I can't imagine he was there since he wasn't in the episode. But so yeah, basically he was extremely upset that he wasn't in the episode, and talked to Larry right away and said, if you write me out of the show again, do it permanently, because look, I don't want to be a part of a show that doesn't need me in every damn episode. And I never want to look at another episode of Seinfeld and not see me in it. And he kind of says, says it in the way that, like, well, hey, it worked. I mean, I was never excluded again. So yeah, he was pretty upset. And even Julia Louis-Dreyfus says in her interview that she felt pretty bad that Jason and Michael weren't in it. She felt pretty guilty about that. Liz Sheridan, who plays Helen Seinfeld, says that this is her favorite episode. She just got such great material and absolutely loved being a part of it. The commentary, which I was very excited for, Jerry and Larry do the commentary. And, well, instead of commentary, it just was an extra laugh track. And I guess I can't blame them, but Jerry and Larry, I mean, they literally just can't stop laughing throughout the episode, like laughing so hard. So there's not much information or anything I can provide from the commentary except to say that, my Lord, they really enjoyed watching it and laughed super hard at it, especially at the Elaine portions. They were just, oh my gosh, cackling with laughter. But I did like how they sort of summed up the episode in saying that, what they observe at these senior communities is just the smallest possible thing turns into the biggest possible thing. So I think they've definitely done that with the pen. In the notes about nothing, there is a Julia Louis-Dreyfus quote on the platonic relationship between Jerry and Elaine. She says, "It adds more color to their relationship not to be boyfriend-girlfriend. There are still flashes of jealousy on the parts of both of them when they're dating others, but I think that makes the stories less predictable. There are plenty of TV couples without us joining in." Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, I've said it before, but Jerry and Elaine not being a couple, that was key to this show's success. Moving on, I do have a little excerpt from a book that I've mentioned before. It's called Seinfeldia by Jennifer Keeshan Armstrong. Again, I really recommend this book. She's done a great job doing a lot of research and including a lot of great behind the scenes tidbits and stories about, this show that we love. And so for this particular episode in this situation, a lot of what was discussed in Seinfeldia is the whole Jason Alexander response to not being in the episode The Pen. And this is what she says in the book. She says, after the table read for the episode, Alexander pulled David aside. Quote, "If you write me out again," he said, "do it permanently." End quote. David stammered, tried to explain the difficulties of servicing every character equally every week. "Don't tell me your problems," Alexander snapped. "If you don't need me here, I don't want to be here." Wow. So that was definitely a tense exchange. So backing up a bit, Armstrong writes that Jason Alexander had felt a little territorial ever since Julia Louis-Dreyfus had been cast in the second episode, which was only elevated, after reading The Pen, because he wasn't in it and she was. Alexander didn't need this TV career. He had won a Tony on Broadway. He still had his New York apartment. He could go back. He didn't want to waste a minute in LA that he didn't have to. So I've had my thoughts on this, and they've been pretty solid in, I guess, the negative category towards Jason Alexander for a long time, because I, again, being a fan of the show, I've known this story for many years. But I've kind of gone back and forth this week about it as I've thought about what he did and the actions he took. My knee-jerk reaction, which has been sort of the way I've felt about it for the last few years, I just felt that, well, I guess to put it in Seinfeld terms, I felt that the jerk store called and it was running out of Jason Alexander's. Total jerk store move. I mean, after all, look, he's not only been in every single episode until this point, but in majority of them, he's had plenty of meaty plots where he's gotten to shine comedically. It's been basically about George with a little bit of Jerry on the side for the most part. And again, look, I can't deny that I'm looking at this from a very defensive point of view on behalf of JLD. And if you do an apples to apples comparison of each of their contributions up until this point, where The Pen was made, there was no contest. Jason Alexander comes out on top with screen time, storylines, everything. So as I'm getting older and trying to be less judgmental, reflecting a little bit more and sort of taking into account what Jason Alexander said in that Inside Look, now I look at it as he's being an actor advocating for himself. And he did so because he knew his worth. And look, call it ego. He actually called it ego. He didn't shy away from that. But look, it's such a competitive atmosphere, in Hollywood. So if you sense you're being undervalued, you make your voice heard. And it's certainly not an easy thing to do, but that's kind of the way I'm looking at it now. So, I've kind of gone from being annoyed in indirect solidarity for JLD to, kind of admiring the gumption it took for him to do that. Now, would I have done it in this threatening kind of jerk store way? No. But, I love the overall lesson of his actions. Like, don't sit back and don't accept something that you feel is undervaluing your worth. I mean, that's pretty powerful. If I break it down that way, it's a very powerful message. So I'm choosing to look at it through that lens. And let's not forget, I mentioned this in another episode, JLD did the same thing, but in her own way. I mean, not with a don't do it again or I'll leave, but in a tearful meeting with Jerry and Larry and others, saying that they weren't using her to the best of her abilities. So advocating for yourself is not necessarily easy, but no one else is going to do it for you. So JLD and Jason Alexander did it in different ways. And knowing me and how emotional I get, I'd probably would have been more the JLD way. In fact, you know what? I probably wouldn't have said anything because I'd just been so thankful to have a job. But bottom line, advocating for yourself and making sure that if you're feeling like you're not being valued the way you're supposed to be valued, and this can be obviously for any field of work, you make your voice heard and you kind of demand like, hey, this is what I'm worth. You're lucky to have me. So let's make sure I'm actually being included or being compensated the way I should be, whatever it may be. That's your lesson, folks. Advocate for yourself. No one else is really going to do it for you. So there you go. So I take back my jerk store comment, George, or Jason Alexander. George is definitely a jerk store. Jason Alexander, well, at least in this instance, I don't think he's a total jerk store. He was just looking out for number one. All right, moving on to Contributor Corner. Sarah Constantakis. Yay, we have comments from Sarah. She was our very first contributor in our first episode, so I'm excited that she wrote in for this episode. This is what Sarah had to say about the pen. There's a return to that Elaine-Jerry relationship awkwardness in this episode. Though they're not sleeping in the same bed, they're on a trip together to visit his parents, which is a thing couples do. And when they first arrived, Jerry is whispering explanations to his parents about their relationship status out of Elaine's earshot. Yeah, I guess I didn't look at it as awkward, except for that little moment where he's trying to, whisper, why are you whispering? And explain to his parents. I looked at it as like, okay, this is their very feeble attempt to follow up, that deal episode where we get zero follow-up for the next two episodes because of the running order got all out of whack or whatever. But yeah, it is a very couples thing to do. I think you're right. And that explanation of can't seem to be friends when we sleep together, that's our explanation, I suppose. But I also think that it becomes a little clearer that Elaine's tagging along to go scuba diving. At any rate, yes, I agree. It's a very interesting way for them to be together in this visit. It is a very couple thing to do, and but I also like that there isn't a hint of them being a couple at all. I really actually do appreciate that. They could have very easily maybe alluded to something with the bed or maybe acting like they were a couple for Jerry's parents' sake or something, something that I think a normal sitcom would do. I appreciate that they didn't do that at all. All right, Sarah goes on to say, JLD shows off her physical comedy skills when she twists frantically as she's trying to get comfortable in the pull-out bed. She has a lot of those frantic, frustrated physical body contortions throughout the series, and they're a great aspect of her character. Oh, definitely. Like I said earlier, I mean, just that spin, it's like she's hot, she's sweaty. She knows this is not going to help, but it's just her way to get her frustration out, and I love it, and I know for a fact I've done that many times, like you stub your toe on something and then you kick that same thing even when your toe is hurting. It doesn't help, but you just have to do something physically to get this frustration out. This was, again, like I said, the very first time I watched a woman do this kind of physical comedy, and it's tattooed on my brain. And lastly, Sarah says, my biggest takeaway from the pen is that I don't love how Elaine spends most of the episode in vulnerable or compromised positions. In the opening scene, Jerry and his parents are walking on eggshells and whispering about her out of earshot. And then in later scenes, she's either incapacitated on the floor or high on muscle relaxers as a result of her injured back. She's pretty funny in the scenes where she's drugged up, but the Elaine I like is in full control and firing on all cylinders. Oh, wow, that's so interesting. I have just gone on and on about how I thought this was the best thing ever. Oh my gosh. I so love what you're saying though, Sarah. Yeah, I never looked at it that way, that she's vulnerable, or incapacitated. I'm having a lot of trouble with that word, by the way. It's been edited out, but I've had to say that at least 4 times before getting it right. I'm not going to say it again. But, yes, I love full control Elaine, firing on all cylinders, like you said. But I guess I was looking at this more through JLD flexing this comedic, physical comedy, total buffoonery type of performance, and how fun that must have been for her. And which she kind of mentions in the Inside Look, saying, this was just, who would have thought to give this to a woman? And I just was so thrilled to do it. So, but yeah, I can see what you mean, that she, for the most part, is very vulnerable in the episode. So I appreciate that as well. But I don't know why I find this so funny. I'm just like, oh my God, I didn't even look at it like that. I was just so excited for Elaine to be doing dumb shit, but in a brilliant way, I should say. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sending those thoughts in. And trusty Greg, of course we have thoughts from Greg. Greg says, I love the casting of Jerry's parents in this series. They're always doting on Jerry, which is the polar opposite of what we see George's parental dynamic to be. Mr. and Mrs. Costanza are definitely funnier, but the Seinfelds are characters themselves. The casting of Jack Klompus is also perfect. This guy is so unlikable, even though he's fairly friendly. We know he is a petty, vindictive man and a perfect nemesis for Morty. And is this the first time we meet Uncle Leo? He is one of the best characters in the series. An episode without Kramer or George is definitely hard to fathom, but yet with all these great guest actors, the episode proves it can pull off a non-George story. Oh, there's so much in there, Greg, that I love. Yes, agreed. I love that we do have 2 sets of parents in this series that we see pretty regularly, and they are all in their own right very character driven and fleshed out, but they're so different as well. They're, of course, in the same age group, but they represent kind of different levels of being unreasonable or being so annoying. Like, they all have their different ways of portraying that. And I absolutely love, yes, the casting is fantastic. And the character development for all the parents have been, it's just perfection. This isn't actually the first time we see Uncle Leo. It's funny you said that, because in the commentary, I believe Larry David, when they weren't cackling laughing, Larry David says, oh, this is the first time we see Leo. But then we actually already met Uncle Leo in the pony remark. He's sitting next to Jerry at the dinner table and keeps grabbing his elbow. And I love what you say about it's hard to fathom 2 of the main characters not being in an episode. But yes, these guest actors, everyone from Jack Klompus to Evelyn, and then of course the Seinfelds themselves, they round out this world, and they needed to. This is basically just an ode to a Florida retirement community. So I love that they filled that gap. And as weird as it sounds, I remember not even realizing that Kramer and George weren't in it until it was pointed out at some point when I was, watching extras on the DVDs or whatever when this first came out, like years and years ago. So that just goes to show what a strong episode this is, that like, wow, you don't have 2 of the main characters yet. It's still such a rich episode with such great comedy. And yeah, look, not everything's got to be about George, Jason Alexander. Oh, sorry. I just said that. I'm not mad at him about this. I think I still have some residual anger towards Jason Alexander. It's for Elaine, guys. It's for Julia. It's for Julia Louis-Dreyfus' sake. All right, Greg goes on to say, Elaine on the couch bed dealing with both the heat and the bar in her back is just so funny. You can genuinely feel her discomfort. Mrs. Seinfeld, please, I'm begging you, put the air conditioner on. I say this line to my mom when I stay in Florida at her place. What happens after menopause where women are always cold? I always thought this was exaggerated until I started seeing this in my own mother. It cracks me up how Mrs. Seinfeld is shivering in a sweater once the air conditioner comes on. Yes, like I said, I haven't gone through menopause yet, but I can relate to Helen in this moment with the sweater rocking back and forth. And yes, the physical comedy with the bar in her back, you feel everything she's feeling, from the discomfort to the frustration. So brilliant. And lastly, Greg says, the most important thing to mention in this whole episode, of course, is Elaine on the muscle relaxers. She is so over the top goofy that it is ridiculous. But because it's her, she pulls it off. Stella! There is so much happening with the politics of the retirement community. For Elaine to cut through that all in such a silly manner adds that extra hilarity to the scene. Elaine is always very specific in what she does. To see her out of sorts is very funny. All right, so this is sort of the counterpoint to what Sarah said. Sarah likes to see Elaine in control, firing on all cylinders, like she says. And Greg is enjoying this sort of loss of control. And I see it both ways and I love it both ways, but just again, I definitely have to recognize the sentimentality I have for this episode, because it was one of the first ones I had really absorbed so deeply because of watching it over and over again. So I only really see the hilarity of it. And I really, really appreciate the performance. And again, I didn't know it at the time, but just how rare that was at that time for women in a sitcom. Thank you so much, Greg and Sarah. Love all the contributor comments. If you would like to become a contributor on Hot and Heavy, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That is elainepodcast@gmail.com. My favorite Elaine moments. Okay, I've already gone on and on and on about what an impact her performance in this episode had on me, so I'll spare you further gushing, but I will say my absolute favorite moment in the episode, where everything she does is my favorite, essentially, I'd have to pick. Okay, so it's when Aunt Stella says, hello, and JLD, all looped up on her drugs, just leans in and like twitches her head to greet her. She doesn't say anything, but she just kind of like, oh God, I'm imagining it. It just always gets me. She doesn't say anything. She just sort of shakes her head from side to side to say hello to Aunt Stella. And there's no hello, nothing said. The next thing out of her mouth is Stella. So if I were to pick a favorite moment within an episode of favorite moments, that is it. My final notes, the episode as a whole, just moves at such a great pace. Lots of ping pong dialogue. There's no lulls in the story. It establishes the absurdity of being in the senior community so quickly. And just everyone's performance is top notch. It really is. Honestly, it's a near perfect episode for me. And we get to meet Jack Klompus, Sandy Brown, who is a scene stealer. Barney Martin and Liz Sheridan really also get to flex their acting chops here. All the, elderly actors just knocked it out of the park, really carried this episode. Now, obviously, my favorite part of the episode is JLD, but coming in at a close second, I have to say, is Liz Sheridan. Throughout the episode, she doesn't let anything go without some kind of comment or argument. From something small, like when Evelyn says to Jerry, you got thin. Too thin? Oh, stop worrying so much about how you look. Like, everything has a Helen comment or argument. And, it goes from something little like that to the major issue of the pen. And Liz Sheridan's performance, kind of getting into what Greg was saying, it's the understated and grounded naggy mother, as opposed to an Estelle Costanza vibe, which is so much louder and like panicky. And it's just such a different energy. Helen Seinfeld nags just as much, but not as angrily or as loudly as Estelle does. And I love that we get to see the representations of both of these types of mother characters. And they possess kind of the same core qualities, but it's brought out in different ways. And that's just a testament to the writing and the acting on this series. Well, I think that's all I can say about the pen. Thank you guys so much for listening. Oh, and I want to mention one more time, I really loved this episode. I'm not sure if I said it enough, so I just wanted to make sure to get that out there. Just kidding. You guys are probably sick of me saying it. But anyway, I love this episode. It's a classic Seinfeld episode, but for me personally, it is the episode that just solidified this love for JLD. There would be no Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast, without this episode, to be quite honest. So thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.